Hey, I'm Kelly Hogan, and welcome back to my Zero Carb Life. Coming back on the channel for, I don't know, is this three,
Yes,
four?
I think the three's a charm.
For the third time, is my dear friend Dani Conway. She's a functional nutritionist and a functional medicine practitioner. She also has a lot of other credentials that I will put on the screen, but can't remember to say them all right now.
Okay.
I love you, Dani. You and I talk, I'd say at least once a week.
Yeah, probably more.
Probably more in the DMs. I go on your calls, you come on my calls, we take turns, and I think you're fabulous. So thanks for coming back.
Absolutely.
Today we are going to solve two of the biggest problems that people face, and
Let's do
we're gonna
it.
become billionaires after this because leg cramps and hair loss. If we could figure that out, yeah. Clearly, if you eat meat, you have no hair whatsoever. No hair on our heads at all. We're going to talk about hair loss today, but I think first let's start with leg cramps.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely a struggle for many people. And one of the biggest things that I see is that it's a struggle for many people in the beginning of carnivore,
Yeah.
but it also can be a struggle after they've been carnivore for a while. And I think that there's this sort of mentality that, oh, once you're carnivore for a while, all these things won't happen. But it's, definitely it's still possible that we need to keep things balanced and we might struggle with some symptoms after being carnivore for 6 months, a year, that kind of thing.
I used to have leg cramps before carnivore, and then I went carnivore and started losing weight. Weight loss can very often bring on leg cramps, and it did. It's not that it was because I was carnivore. I had them before too. So
Mhm.
I think it's important for people to know that it's not just, oh, you're eating meat, now expect to get the leg cramps. But also, don't have the idea, just like Dani said, don't get the idea that if you're eating an animal-based or completely carnivore diet, that you're never going to have to worry about a leg cramp again because I have off and
Yeah,
on.
and I will say, like, I've had a lot of electrolyte symptoms over the years that I've solved, and leg cramps has never been, knock on wood, leg cramps has actually never been one of those for me. So it's interesting how things sort of, come about with different people and one size never fits all and biochemical individuality for sure.
It has been a struggle in my family, mostly the men and me, but so many leg cramps. My grandpa, this is the beloved grandpa of mine that passed away of a heart attack at 54, but for his adult life, leg cramps at night so bad that my grandma said it looked like softballs on the back of his legs. He could not stand. She would have to just wake up at night and knead and knead until they would release. He was a
Oh.
big, strong man, and he would be gripping the mattress, hollering. My dad, lifelong leg cramps. So this is a very personal issue for me. Also, one of my very, very best BFFs, you know her, we all love
Share miles.
Erin Miles. I adore this woman, and she's been carnivore 5 years, and she still fights with the leg cramps. And like many people, they come and go in waves. So just want folks to know it's not me just going, I don't know, I gave it a little thought today on how we could fix leg cramps. Like, I'm passionate about it. I've lived with it. People I know have lived with it. And I really want to try to help people. You and I have both seen some solutions work like gangbusters for one person and be trash for another. Should we start with I have a list of possible solutions. One of them is give it time.
It's not my favorite solution because leg cramps are one of those things that are really hard to live with, especially if they're waking someone up overnight
Yeah.
and they're very intense. So, give it time is not my favorite solution. I like to have people starting with managing and looking at their hydration and their electrolyte status.
Okay.
And for some people, and I'm sure we can go into more on this, but for some people, it's, the case of too much electrolytes, and for other people, it's going to be not enough electrolytes.
Yeah. If you meet somebody who is going through what we generally call adaptation, meaning I have cut out carbs and now my whole system is like, what is happening here? I say you can expect anything and everything if you went from a lot of carbs to none. We see it all, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't last forever. You're adapting. So yes, maybe give it some time. Uh, But I'm with you. It's a really rough, even if it's just 2 weeks. That's an awful 2 weeks. So if it's not just settling down, what's your electrolyte recommendation for somebody who says I'm taking none?
So for someone who says I'm taking none, I like them to start with definitely unsweetened
Hmm.
and something like snake juice powder. I like that one because it has a higher amount of potassium with sodium and it does have some magnesium. But a lot of times the potassium is what's needed for the leg cramps.
Yeah.
And there's other powders out there that don't have enough potassium. So people end up over supplementing sodium and then they're missing out on the potassium and magnesium. 40,000 volts is another one that I like. And I will say I do not have any affiliation with these brands. And I find a little bit of a combination of those two, depending on the individual person, is a really great start.
Yeah. A lot of people it's all about the element, element. But it is much higher in magnesium, which I think we would both agree some people do well with.
Mhm.
But if they're already taking, do you ever get people who say, I'm taking 3 to 4 packs of 4 pack? I'm like, you're taking 4 packs of element a day? And they'll say, and the leg cramps just, they're getting worse. I'm like, and should I add a fifth pack, Dani? And you're like, maybe no.
Yeah, no, and I think that I will just say as a side note, that brand does work for many people. So I don't want, and I do recommend it, and I do use some elements sometimes. So I just want to be, fair playing field across the board. So with adding more and more of the element, you're getting more and more sodium, less and less, the ratio is the same even if you're adding more. And so that is where, exacerbating the symptoms can get worse. And then another thing that will exacerbate the symptoms across the board with any of these that we're talking about is not enough water in relationship to how much electrolytes they're taking. And there's a lot of controversy over how much water that we should be drinking, especially in the space, because a lot of recommendations are drink when you're thirsty. And that doesn't always work. I see on blood work and urinalysis testing all the time when individuals are following that recommendation that they are dehydrated. And then they go add, sodium. And what's that going to make you do? Retain water if you're dehydrated and other symptoms. So it's kind of like a little bit of a domino effect. And so that's, another thing that I see a lot.
When somebody adds electrolytes, or let's say we'll talk magnesium too. Okay, let's go ahead and talk magnesium. If
Okay.
somebody wants to just try magnesium, is the form for leg cramps, I think you told me once, glycinate would be the type.
Yes, and I see probably the least amount of symptoms from people trying to add more magnesium because I will say that magnesium deficiency is rampant
Hmm.
in in the world, not just within carnivore or even the keto space.
Yeah.
So magnesium deficiency, magnesium is important for, it's a cofactor for hormone production. It's important for many, many functions. And so therefore, I think that adding magnesium, because there is a tendency towards that type of deficiency, many can add magnesium and not the correct form and not necessarily have any uh, negative symptoms. There's, citrate. If they add too much citrate, they're going to, end up in the bathroom too much. It's going to exacerbate a diarrhea problem. But yes, to your question, yes, it should be magnesium glycinate ideally.
Is there, I know it depends if somebody were to test really low on magnesium versus if they haven't tested, but do you have for the general public, if they think maybe I am low in magnesium, a good starting point on glycinate?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that one to say like 250 to 300 milligrams, and they can kind of adjust from there. It's one of those things that can be fairly non-invasive, if you
Hmm.
will, to just kind of try something like that. I don't like to make a lot of general supplement recommendations, as you well know, but
Yeah.
just for anyone that doesn't. But that is definitely something that, someone could play around with and they're going to notice something or they're not, you
How
know.
long do you think it does it normally take? Days or weeks before you would go, okay, this glycinate thing is or is not working?
I've heard both. I've heard some say they feel a difference pretty immediately, and others have kind of stuck with it for a few weeks to a month to maybe a few months and notice a difference as well. So I think it depends on how much of a deficiency there is. What else is going on? Does someone have a bunch of hormone imbalances, or are they super balanced and they're just kind of trying to maybe fine tune some last, we'll call it last minute symptoms or things that they're experiencing?
You ever recommend the topical magnesium sprays for the
Yeah,
leg?
I
I've
think
tried those.
Yeah, I mean, I think that works well again for some people. I've had some people say that that's like a lifesaver. Like they might wake up in the middle of the night and do a spray, especially, because it's more acute in that area, versus taking something orally that then has to be digested, assimilated, and absorbed. So they definitely can work. Again, do they work for everyone? No.
No, because
It's
I
like,
tried them and no, it did not help. I did it, I think I went through 3 bottles because somebody in this space that I really trust, and it's not bad advice,
right.
and I believed in it so hardcore. I was like, this is it, the magnesium spray. And 3 bottles later, I was like, nope, I don't think this is it.
A for effort, three
Thank
bottles. I mean,
Yeah, I was all but bathing in it every night for months, and it's just not helping.
so if you need potassium and you try to take a bunch of magnesium, you're going to end up just maybe throwing off that ratio or that relationship of those electrolyte minerals to each other. You're just going to end up throwing it off more. You may have more symptoms, so it may get worse before it gets better. So in that case, I like to say, well, you tried, you figured out what didn't work, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because you figured out what didn't work. So, and back to the Epsom salt baths, I mean, that's another thing. Works great for some, but if you're prone to diarrhea, you have to be really careful because then you're going to end up, again, throwing off whatever is going on that's causing that. So you're kind of juggling a little bit.
Okay, so the short version on electrolytes is it's a little complicated, but if
Yeah.
you are taking none, it might be worth trying a packet of your choice or the 40,000 volts. I like the snake juice powder too. It sounds like if somebody's already taking a lot, you and I have both recommended maybe back off. I think I have as many people come back and say, whew, that was it, with backing off of so many packets as it is adding more and more. And
Right.
I hear the rule of thumb that if a person, let's say you weigh 200 pounds, then you would drink 100 ounces of water as sort of a starting point. Is that a good rule of thumb?
Um, this is like such a controversial question and topic.
I know.
I know. I still use that rule of thumb,
Okay.
especially if I have clients who I believe are struggling with dehydration.
Hmm.
Because once they start drinking more and I give them a goal to work towards, of let's say they're only drinking 40 ounces of water a day, and they just start to, and their goal should be 100, and they just start to move towards that goal,
Hmm.
I find that they start to improve whatever symptoms they're having. So, is that the correct number? I don't know, but it works to work towards that and then to kind of see what happens. I always tell people, I never want you to feel waterlogged.
Yeah.
I never want you to feel like you're going to float away. I never want you to feel like your belly is full of water. Those types of things, no, you definitely wouldn't want to drink to that point. So not forcing yourself to do so. And so as long as that half your body weight in ounces are working towards that, doesn't promote any negative symptoms, and people usually tend to start reporting more positive things happening, then they know they're on the right track.
Oh, I like that advice. Hey, our mutual friend Bruno
Oh
has
yeah.
said that for him, when it comes to hydration, if he drank too little, he gets leg cramps. He is one of those, sort of like my family members, where it's like a lifelong plague of leg cramps for him, and not little ones, like intense to the point of almost blacking out. And he says if he drinks a whole lot of water in big sessions, like, okay, I'm going to hydrate today, chug, 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 he actually gets worse leg cramps. But if he can take his water and just throughout the day sip, sip, just keep a constant, steady, slow flow of water, that has been the most successful thing for him. So I know that you're a sipper. I've been in enough of your classes to know that you do. You hydrate just throughout the day.
I love that, you're talking about that because absorption is better that way.
Okay.
You're not putting a large amount into your gut, expecting it to, that's why you feel terrible when you try to drink lots of water at one time. But that will also mitigate or balance the trips to the bathroom for sure, because
Right.
as people start to drink more water, I think it's important to realize that that is a normal process of the body flushing out, because that's what you want. And that will level off after your body, detoxes a little bit and flushes that out. So.
I bet it's also better when it comes to stomach acid too. People who don't sip throughout the day, but then they're chugging water with meals, which I tend to be that person. I don't get thirsty till I'm eating. Then I'm eating and I'm just going through, a couple cans of seltzer, just throwing it back. Not so good for the stomach acid.
Yeah, and I like that I forgot to bring that up, so I'm glad you did. So for water or liquids, 20 minutes before your meals, 1 hour after is a good rule of thumb. And that's not to say don't drink any liquid with your meal. I like, seltzer water too, so I drink a little bit with my meals. But it's the large quantities of guzzling. I know you just said you do it, but I'm just saying, especially if you have digestive issues.
Yes.
If you're doing any of the things we're talking about and you have zero issues and your stomach feels great and your bloating is gone and all the things, then keep doing all the things, that you're doing. It just is, those are things that people can fine tune that can really help to make a difference because you're not diluting your digestive enzymes. You're not diluting your HCl, which is going to help absorb your protein and nutrients and all of that.
You said 20 minutes before meals. So 20 minutes before you eat, start thinking, okay, slow down on the water. And then while you're eating your meal, just slow sips, not a lot of water, and it said up to an hour afterwards. Just think of this as like my little protective time if you're having issues, people. Okay, I like that too. We are not in the habit of getting in the way of progress. If it's working, carry on.
Fine tuning too. So I think that for those that think that, oh, what you're doing is working,
Mhm.
take it to a next level. See if you do notice any good changes by trying any of the things that we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not just, we don't want to wait till we're falling apart. That's true. We can fine tune before we need a new engine. Hey, I'm going to interrupt my own video for just a moment to tell you about my coaching groups. We share breakthroughs and struggles, troubleshooting every session. You have the opportunity for a Q&A to talk. There are 8 separate groups, and the groups are kept to a size where I can communicate with you and talk to you. I always allow people to raise their hand if they have things they want to discuss. You have access to me as well. And a couple other things. One of them is the password protected TDEE, which is my Zero Carb Life exclusive, where you enter, takes about 30 seconds to enter your information, and it gives you the amount of calories that are recommended for your age, size, and activity level, along with all of that advice regarding protein and fat. Then you also get access for the month of coaching to a 127-page carnivore guide. In addition to that, I post in our private Facebook groups for members only every single day, and you have the chance to interact with one another every day, as well as myself. I would love to see you there. Thanks. Before we move on past electrolytes, and I promise we will, I just wanted to mention we talked a lot about magnesium, and we talked water. If someone says, look, I know for sure it's not magnesium, because I've followed the advice. The magnesium pushers are hardcore. And I know why, because as soon as they took that magnesium glycinate, their cramps stopped. So they
Yes.
assume, you idiots, why are you all not taking magnesium? And some of us are like, because it does nothing for me. So if they have determined magnesium is not my answer, but they want to see maybe is it potassium, how should they go about trying that?
So you can, single out potassium just like you can single out, if you will, the magnesium. I don't use the no salt product that I know you recommend sometimes.
Mm.
I know a lot of people have a lot of success with that.
Yeah.
Trace Minerals, the company that makes the 40,000 volts, they also make a pure liquid potassium. So that might be an option too for someone that's looking for maybe a liquid option or they just want to, the one thing I love about liquids, because I use a lot of liquid tinctures in my practice with my clients with their protocols, is that you can dose way, way down for individuals that are super sensitive or they might not need a lot. So that's where liquid, especially something that's in, drop form, can come in handy, and you can really fine tune that and test and see what you need and where the threshold is.
Okay. You mentioned the no salt. There's a no salt brand and a new salt brand. So all of these that are like salt, sodium substitutes, they're made of potassium chloride. And I found for myself that I do love to salt. I'm not afraid of salt at all. I know some people like my dad use the no salt because he was told don't use real
Oh,
salt.
right.
That's not why I would ever use it. But I found that if I just used some of that throughout the day, it really did help my cramps to go away. And I thought, huh. And then I heard my friend Bruno, he may have been the one that first suggested it, that it really did help with him too. So I think it's an option, but it would obviously be a little easier to control exactly how much you were using if you were doing something like a liquid. Do you have many clients that end up taking potassium in pill form?
None. I don't think I ever recommend
Okay.
potassium in pill form. Because I'm typically recommending other more of compound minerals,
Okay.
and that tends to cover what they need. So I usually don't recommend potassium on
Okay.
its own.
And if you do think potassium is the problem, that snake juice powder and 40,000 volts,
It's
that's
good
why.
combination,
It's
yeah.
a good combination. And that's why I think they worked better for me when I was having cramps. What's next on this list? Talked water.
Dun dun dun.
Dun, dun, dun. All right. I have gone down a little rabbit hole recently, Danny, and no one, I don't think, is gonna like me for bringing this up because it's not carnivore, but it's apple cider vinegar. Did you know that if you type in leg cramps, solutions, leg cramps, how to fix it, one of the big things that comes up over and over, Dr. Eric Berg, Dr. Sten Ekberg is a huge fan of apple cider vinegar. But one of the reasons I'm bringing it up with you is I've taken your class. I've heard you mention apple cider vinegar, but not for leg cramps. And I thought when you first mentioned it, I thought, apple cider vinegar? That feels so random. And I'm sure some of you right now, you judgy people, are just like me. So, what's the deal with apple cider vinegar?
So, as far as the apple cider vinegar goes, I usually recommend it for digestion and more of like a cleansing, first thing in the morning, kind of get the body going, get the kidneys going, flush out toxins, things like
Mhm.
that. I actually have never recommended it for leg cramping. So I cannot speak to that, but possibly something with the acidity levels and kind of regulating the hydration, and flushing the system out. I would guess maybe it has something to do with that.
So I went on, I'm a huge fan of watching a video and then reading all of the 4,000 comments just to get like survey the crowd
Yeah.
of what are
Yeah.
people saying about it. Dr. Eric Berg and Dr. Sten Ekberg have videos about apple cider vinegar and leg cramps. I will link to those. Dr. Eric Berg says to take a tablespoon in a glass of water twice per day. And part of it was because it was supposed to increase the acetylcholine levels. And apparently, increased acetylcholine levels help with leg cramps, according to those guys. So I read through the comments. There were a lot of people who said, this was it for me. This was it. The apple cider vinegar got rid of the leg cramps. Again, I don't know. Is it a little bit mental? Who cares, right? Go ahead and believe it and take your apple cider vinegar. Believe super hard, maybe.
I will say that there's a percentage of people that do try apple cider vinegar and it does make some digestive issues worse.
Okay.
So be aware of that. It doesn't work for everyone. It depends. One size never fits all, like we were saying.
Yeah.
So that one I would say just be aware and don't take too much. Like literally 1 tablespoon in a large glass of water or 1 teaspoon in a smaller glass of water can be
Okay.
all somebody needs.
Also, want to throw out that if anyone is having a hard time giving up alcohol, I learned this trick a long time ago. Take some seltzer water, put a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar in a fruit, if you use, like a Waterloo or something like that, seltzer, has a little bit of a wine taste to it.
Interesting.
I know it's kind of pleasant, Danny. It is. I enjoy a teaspoon of cider vinegar in a glass of seltzer. So, and I've also been told if you actually have an ulcer, you will find out very quickly. If,
Yes.
yeah, so if you have any pain or discomfort, if you're worried about your teeth, you can use a straw and rinse your mouth with water afterwards. Um, anything?
Yeah, as a side note on the apple cider vinegar, 20 minutes before a meal can also help with HCl production, hydrochloric acid production. So that's another little tidbit to try. Again, if it causes pain or any kind of issues, then you would not want to do that.
Okay. All right. And the people who are hating on apple cider vinegar right now are probably not up all night with leg cramps. And those of you who are like, okay, I'll try that, especially if it makes my seltzer taste like a wine spritzer. Okay. Ticking off all kinds of people right now, probably, but I just want people to sleep through the night. It's so important to get sleep, and it's really hard to sleep when you're hobbling around, hooping and hollering. Very hard.
Yeah,
Okay.
insomnia is one of the things that probably one of the top three complaints I get in my group programs and in my one-on-one practice is the insomnia thing. So it's rampant for sure.
A couple of like low hanging fruit things. If you are sleeping with super tight sheets, I can testify this as a leg cramp sufferer. You've really got to loosen the sheets at your feet. If there's anything bending toes down, this doesn't have anything to do with diet. This is just a pro tip. And it's going to make your bed messier, and you're going to have to retuck it in the morning when you make your bed. I get it. Pull the sheets out. When I go to a hotel, you know how they really tightly tuck it. You got to loosen that mess, y'all. It's a thing. If you have recently increased exercise or you're not doing any movement at all, sometimes a change in exercise I've noticed can help. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Definitely, anytime you change movement or you do something new or you potentially don't stretch enough or you maybe overstretch because you think I started something new, I want to, make sure that I stretch my muscles or compensate for starting something new or pushing a little bit harder. Any type of movement that might be out of balance for what your body needs, meaning like you overstretch, you understretch, all those
Yeah.
things could definitely create cramping.
I've noticed like if I'm out walking a lot in flip-flops, it can cause leg cramps. Like sometimes I think we're looking for these deep, deep sources and it's like, oh, I hold my feet funny in these particular shoes. So it can be something as surface level as that. Mouth taping. You and I are both mouth tapers. You don't tape because of leg cramps, but I do. It was a total game changer. I truly believe that I could have changed anything, magnesium, potassium, all of it. But if you are not getting enough nitric oxide and solid oxygen at night, I
Oxygen.
get leg cramps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of an amazing thing. I mean, I get a lot of people that say like, I'm not a mouth breather. I kind of know about it, but I'm not a mouth breather, so I've never tried it. I like to encourage people to try it, even if you think you are not a mouth breather. Because number one, I didn't think I was a mouth breather, but I was.
Yep.
And another thing that I would sort of tack onto that is when you can realize that you're a mouth breather at night,
Mm.
you're going to realize how much you mouth breathe during the day. And that can also contribute to anxiety and stress in the body, cortisol stress, things like that, because you know,
Yes.
have that sort of happening, especially in more stressful situations. So I know that's a total side note. I hope you don't mind I just said that, but I just thought it
Oh.
would help.
Yeah, and also people can have more elevated heart rate, just
Same. Yep.
shallow mouth breathing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I found that I got in the habit of doing that back around 2020 when I was teaching school all day with a mask. I
Yes.
became a mouth breather more then. I don't know why. It was like I held my jaw a certain way. I was required to wear it, and I found that my leg cramps were getting so much worse at night. And that was the year I started mouth taping. I know that you love the brand called Hostage Tape, which funny name, I get it, but really good for very sensitive skin. I've had some people say I cannot mouth tape because it breaks me out, but that's a good one for you.
Yeah, we love that one. My husband uses it too. It's actually was originally made for men with facial hair. Just as another pro tip, the size of the tape is usually about this big. So for
Mhm.
some people, that's going to be a little bit large. We actually cut it either in half, or even in fourths. So when I first started, I only taped up and down because I sneeze sometimes during the night and it's a little weird when your whole mouth is taped. So once I got used to it, now I tape across my whole mouth. So one of those pieces can last 2 to 4 nights, which I think is, just a little budget tip there.
Okay, so I use this kind just to show what she's saying. Look how big. This is a big
You
piece.
need the whole thing, right?
I use the whole thing, but not. I think most people could easily get away with cutting this, maybe even in the force. I got a big mouth, so I do use it. Uh, but this is PAP MD. I'll link to a couple other kinds. And one of our good friends, Nanette, who's in my groups, Nanette, who was on the channel 2 weeks ago, she recommends a kind that actually has a very small slit in the middle. And I tried using her kind, and it's for people who feel very claustrophobic, or if you do have to sneeze, it makes some people feel a little safer about it.
Speaking of feeling safe, if people are feel like anxiety, because I actually had some anxiety before, I was like, oh my gosh, my mouth is going to be taped all night
Hmm.
long. I think putting on the tape and an hour before bed, just sit and read with it on, do some breath work with it on, so you can, you're teaching your body and your nervous system that everything's going to be fine. You're not suffocating. There's nothing, nothing's going to happen. You start to train your body to nose breathe.
Yeah.
And then after a week or two of that, in significant cases, then you can start to sleep with the tape overnight. So it's a good way to get used to it if you have some reservations about, mouth taping before
Oh,
you go to bed.
and I sure did. When the first night I tried, I thought, how can anybody breathe through these tiny little holes? It felt like I was trying to breathe through like coffee stirrers. Like I could not get enough air.
Right.
And now, uh, if I don't have tape, I'm going to go find a Band-Aid somewhere. I will be taped up at night. It has become so important to me not having to get up to urinate all night, not having leg cramps. I no longer wake up stuffy, whereas I
Yes.
used to. It's a big
That was a
one.
big that was a big one for me. I used to wake up with a sore throat too. And I mean for no reason at all. And
Right.
I realized like magically I'm like, that's not happening anymore. That's so interesting. And I was like, oh, yeah, I was a mouth breather. I didn't even know it. I would think, oh, I had dairy yesterday. Maybe that's it. I had this yesterday. Maybe that's it. And then it's like, hey, I'm just, and I have, removed dairy and had trouble with dairy in the past, but I typically don't now. But after I started the mouth taping, and it's been a few years for me as well at this point, I don't wake up with any of those things anymore.
Yep. Me too. Me too. I love the mouth taping. I think I've talked about it now in like 4 videos. I'm sure people are like, lady, move on. I will not move on. I will not. And neither will Dani. And
Exactly.
I think I have had not quite. I was about to say, as many people come back and say that mouth taping was a life changer as carnivore. But when people do both, the carnivore and the mouth taping, a lot of folks will say it really changed their life. But expect it, I bet you'll agree, expect it to not get better right away. Sometimes it gets a little worse.
Yes, in fact, I think when I first started, I was kind of like, this really isn't a big deal. The more I did it, the more I taped and the longer I noticed more improvement. So it took, I would say, a good 6 months even. I mean, I definitely noticed some improvements early on, but now that I've been doing it for a few years, I would say looking back, it's definitely something that over time, I would definitely give it time.
Yeah. When I have somebody just last week said, I tried the mouth taping. It was not for me. I said, oh, okay. Well, that's obviously that's okay. But it turns out she'd only tried for 2 nights. And I was like, well, my first 2 nights were awful. I couldn't figure out how to use nostrils. It takes some time. I would rip it off during the night. It would end up in my hair. Like it takes time to adjust to breathing through a different body part.
Yeah.
If people want to know more about why on earth does it even matter which body parts you're breathing out of, the book Breath by James
Yes.
Nestor, excellent read.
Good one. Yeah.
Okay, there are some medications. I learned this recently from Dr. Barry. He had a video about medications that can cause leg cramps. And this was not the issue for me, but I think we should throw them out there.
Oh.
Birth control pills, diuretics, even Aleve, estradiol, albuterol, naproxen. There's a whole list. So how about if we just link to Dr. Barry?
So one thing that I just want to mention, I do see thyroid issues as being a culprit with leg cramping. So that's one thing. And then I think with any type of medication, hormones, all of those things, yes, there are side effects, especially with hormones. You always just want to make sure if you're taking, like you said, estradiol or other hormone replacement, testing first. I'm a test, don't guess kind of gal. I can't tell you how many clients come to me and they got put on hormone replacement. There was no testing done initially. And that can just, lead someone down the wrong rabbit hole.
Yeah. And we're not saying, oh, if you watch Dr. Barry's video, you should definitely go off of all of these medications. Right.
Sure. Work
Yeah.
with your doctor to go off any medications
You
for
heard it
sure.
here first. That's right. Sure. Okay. Quick ways to stop a cramp. This one I've got like in the back because I've had so many through my whole life. I know that there are some tried and true ways that if you are in the middle of a cramp, it will stop almost immediately with mustard. Mustard will stop a cramp. And
Weird, weird one.
it's a weird one. And I learned this the very hard way in the hospital. I don't know which C-section I had just had. I think it was Thomas, but had just come out of surgery. You can't walk off a leg cramp. You can't get up for anything. And my legs locked up. It was horrible. I picked up the phone to the nurse and I was like, help, help, help. I can't get up and my legs are cramped. You know what? They came running to me with mustard packets and they were like, take this. And immediately, boom. Now I had heard that before, but I thought, okay, well, that's the hospital's
I
strategy.
know. I'm
That's
like,
good. And it's pretty effective. Also, pickle juice will stop it pretty quickly. So it makes you think, this was me. Well, then why am I not just taking mustard and pickle juice before bed to prevent it? It's not preventative. And you know what I've found out, Dani, as to why we're not deficient. This is not a mustard and pickle juice deficiency, people. So just stop with that. There is a muscle in the back of the throat that when it contracts, it releases the leg cramp.
oh, so taking something, ingesting something is,
It's got to be something that causes that muscle to go like, eek, eek. Okay. The mustard, the pickle juice, hot sauce, anything, apple cider vinegar that is so like, it can't be diluted because again, it's not the ingredient, obviously, because the second you put it in your mouth and swallow, it's gone. It's not like, I've heard people say, it's the turmeric. That turmeric did not hit my legs that quickly.
and there's such a small amount really in that, in a little bit of mustard.
Yes. So it's that muscle. Now, nobody wants to sit around for the rest of their lives just waiting for the cramp to come so that they can swallow mustard. I've lived that life. It does work, but that's no fun. But it does help stop it in the moment if anybody's, I don't know, never heard that before. And another thing that my friend Karen Miles, again, cheers, Karen, said is that if you, she had read this one time and it really does help release it if you're already having the cramp, is if you squeeze your ab muscle like you're doing a sit up in the bed, it can actually cause that tension of that muscle will release the legs without you having to get up and walk around. And I know that that does work for some people.
Sure. And I think with that, just being intentional about using your actual core versus sucking in your stomach, that's a big
Mhm.
mistake I see a lot of people making. In fact, you probably have it, but I have the Stronger to the Core guide, which talks about the proper way to engage your stomach muscles. And so that can really be a factor there because sometimes people suck in, but they're not actually engaging their core. And
Yeah.
so that can make a difference as well.
Yeah, I've heard it described as suck in, and I tried that once and it didn't do anything, but I wasn't actually engaging the abdominal muscle. Okay, we were planning to make this video about leg cramps and hair loss, as you may have guessed by the fact that that's how we introduced this video, but we're gonna make part two on the hair, which will come out, I assume, in another week after this one. It's just too big of a topic,
And
Dani.
we always have a lot to talk about. So,
Yeah, I enjoy talking to you. I'm never in any hurry to wrap it up. We didn't say salt. I do want, I think it's important to bring this up. I'm a member of a couple of Facebook groups where their biggest solution is cut out all salt. They are complete anti-salters. And I actually did do that strategy for, I gave it several months. And I was not plagued with leg cramps during that time. It's not that I never ever had one, but it did not make things any worse for me. And when I read the comments, I love the comments. I actually did find quite a few people who said, "Ooh, that got worse for a little while, but then it got better."
mhm.
But then I do know some people who gave it months without salt, and they said that wasn't it.
Yeah, so I've seen it go both ways too. For me and my client population, women over 40, a lot of active women trying to build muscle, body composition, that type of thing. Sodium is really important for muscles to fire, workouts, energy, things like that. Obviously, the right balance with the other electrolyte minerals. So
Yeah.
I typically am not a no salt. I personally am not a no salter. I am very active. I ride horses. I sweat a lot. In the winter time, I sweat still, but it's harder to drink water in the winter time. So the salt I feel like does help me.
Okay.
Um, I'm the first person to tell someone to stop salting if they feel like they don't need it or it's not working or they're retaining water or whatever is going on that makes me feel like they shouldn't be salting anymore. It's not typically my first go-to recommendation, and I do find that people still do okay with some amount of salt if they've been over salting.
A lot of the people who say they get fine results with no salt at all are typically eating large amounts of meat because you can get sodium from meat. It's just you're going to have to eat 2 to 3 pounds for most people to get enough sodium.
Right. And my clients aren't eating 2 to 3 pounds of meat because they've tried that. They've either gained weight, they've gotten an increase in their digestive issues. That approach hasn't worked for them. So that could very well be why salting, they still need to salt. But, I think at the end of the day, and you can probably agree with me, Kelly, it's about fine-tuning what works for the individual person. And if something that someone tells you doesn't work, even us, we don't want you to do it. And if it does, we want you to do it. If what you're doing is working and we didn't talk about it, then you should continue doing that also.
And
So,
they should also post that in the comment section because hopefully people will come and read. So that would be a great time for us to stop and say, hey, have you tried any of these? Did they work? Educate us. I'm going to come back and read it. Tell us what actually works. Oh, we did not mention under eating, but I have had experiences through my life of dieting where it wasn't just because I was losing weight, it's because I wasn't eating enough. And that can also really trigger everything bad, including leg cramps.
which could be part three because we're both really big fans of not underfueling.
Huge fans. You and I really should do an entire video on just please make sure you're eating enough. Please.
I think there's so many different levels of over versus under and that fine-tuning process. I think that's a super important conversation. So maybe that
Yeah.
will be for part three.
You and I, neither one push people to say you must stuff yourself at every single meal. You have to have this certain poundage of meat per day, but also if you're under eating, you can expect problems and they get worse than leg cramps if it's chronic,
Yeah,
right?
for
Not a
sure.
10% deficit. We're talking under eating. These people who are trying to live on 900 calories a day for years on end, you can expect a leg cramp
Yep.
and and worse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay, all hearts clear on the leg cramp issue.
I think we're good on that one.
Okay, we're gonna come back to you next week with our hair to discuss carnivore hair loss. But for right now, thank you, Dani. I hope this helps somebody, and y'all head to the comments and let us know what works for you. Thanks, Dani. Bye.